Hi
By the way,
everyone,
yeah.
it's recording already. Welcome, good morning. We're gonna give it a few minutes for everyone to come in. Meanwhile, if you're here already, you can tell us where you're watching us from because it's always nice to see. So there's a lot of different countries, continents even, so I'm curious.
No, that's cool.
Amsterdam, someone next to us. What else? Berlin.
Cool.
Ooh, Berlin's nice. Who else? Who else?
Nice, Barcelona.
France, Barcelona. Barcelona is one of my favorite cities. Amsterdam again, nice. Okay, we'll give it just one more minute.
Amsterdam people really showing up today.
Yeah, I guess it's close by. I don't know. I
Yeah.
guess we're more known around here. We usually have some people also from like Egypt, and
Well, that's cool.
yeah, very curious. Okay, so we're gonna start while some more people come in. Meanwhile, if you come in, yeah, feel free to tell us where you're watching this from because it's always fun to see. Um, oh, Bulgaria, nice. So thank you for joining everyone. Today we have a very cool webinar for you, how Zoltan learned to successfully create a content production system. We have Zoltan, very
Hey,
cool
everyone.
speaker for you guys today. He's a growth marketeer and focuses on B2B strategy, building, copywriting, content creation, view editing, and landing page creation. So you're in very good hands today. I just want to remind some guidelines. If you have any questions for Zoltan during this session, please drop in the Q&A box down. So he'll answer everything in the end of the session. And then your questions don't get lost in the chat, which happens a lot. And in the end, you'll receive a feedback form. So please don't forget to fill it in because we really appreciate your feedback. And also Zoltan appreciates your feedback. And after you fill it in, you'll receive the recording and the resources with this session. So please don't forget to fill it in. And yeah, I'll give you the floor. Good luck and enjoy, everyone.
Thank you. So, hey, yeah, good morning, everyone. Or depending on where you're joining in from, maybe it's not morning for you. So yeah, as Mathilde told you guys, I'll be talking about how I set up a content system in the past about 10 months for Saasmic. And just to give you an idea on how the presentation will look like, so please do let me know if you feel like something is not viewable. I won't be presenting, probably just going through all of the different parts of this mirror board. But to be fair, there won't be much that you need to read. Most of it you wouldn't need to read because the whole point of today's presentation will be that I will be sort of just showing you guys what I did, what we did, and some really practical things. So real life examples that we were doing. And everything else will be basically just the structure of how we set up things. So that's not as important. So I'll be just running through where we started from, how I set up my initial goals, some testing and trialing, how I actually managed to craft the system that we work with today. And then from then on, okay, what are we doing? Where are we going for? So, in the beginning, let me basically just talk a little bit about my background. I think three key stages that worth mentioning. One is I was a junior producer at Cartoon Network, which was, to be honest, way too much fun. It gave the basis for writing and editing. I really loved it. I think another key important part to my background as a marketer is when I did financial sales for Aegon, which honestly, I feel like I learned a lot, but at the same time, it was really stressful. But still, I feel like today it helps a lot because I sort of understand sales even in a practical form. And that, through the growth marketer or a marketer in general, I feel like that's a really big, add-on. And then lastly, the one thing that I feel like added the most was when we set up our own startup. We might have had a bit more, complex plan on how we want to be doing things. And I still feel like I learned a lot there, but it was super stressful. So plus one, I actually didn't talk about this with Growth Tribe beforehand, but I actually did the Growth Tribe growth marketing course, which gave me my foundations really to start as a marketer. I moved on to work at agencies like Clear. I did a lot of courses from full funnel, from story branding, and then CXL, copy hackers courses with them as well. I'll be sharing all of the resources for these if you guys want to check them out. But I feel like these were definitely the humble beginnings that helped me become the marketer that I am today. And then I feel like it also makes sense to maybe talk about some of my bad attributions, which is I work too hard, I care too much, and sometimes I can be too invested in my job. So let's move on to the agency. Just a bit of background of who we are talking to. Our target audience is mostly low-ticket B2B marketing SaaS companies. So we are doing marketing for these low-ticket SaaS businesses. And then let's look at the core team, because I'll be mentioning some names later, so it makes sense to you guys. So yeah, these two guys are part of the core team, but maybe a better picture that represents us is this. So this is Roxanne. She recently joined us from content, aspect. Thibaut, he mostly does paid social marketing automations and things like that. Apur mostly runs search and paid. And then Ricardo runs, the company runs the agency. Okay, and for now, before we start, I actually wanted to ask you a few questions. I will ask you questions along the way as well. So the first question is, out of those who have been using LinkedIn for a few years, do you feel like organic reach has become better, worse, or you see no change at all? And then, this will make sense later on. So I just want to see what you guys have in mind with this. In the meantime, let me just also say that if you, again, feel like something is not visible enough, just let me know so I can zoom in and out of it. Okay. So interesting. Some people say it's actually better. Some people say it's worse. And then, about 30% says it's worse or no change. But the most of you says that it's better. That's actually interesting to me, because I think, it became a bit worse, mainly because LinkedIn obviously, tends to move towards like paid as well. So people actually buy, the ads and make paid attributions to them. But basically, I think you understand the feeling when you want to be producing something and you feel like, Jesus, I got nothing. I don't know, what to write. And even when you do, and you write like a longest post, and you feel like, okay, now I'm producing something, you get like 5 likes, and let's be honest, like 3 of those likes are either my colleagues or my friends or people I know. So you get really, really little traction on it. You don't see much happening. And then if you move back a bit and you look what was going on like 2 years ago on LinkedIn, you see what Ricardo would be posting. He would be asking like a really simple question, and he would get 68 likes and like 5 comments, and that's pretty nice. And then you see, marketer, how do you explain your job to your parents? Again, 88 likes and 59 comments. And I'm not saying it's a bad question. It's actually a fun question, but try doing it today. You probably won't get the same likes. But to be honest, I don't think it's really about the likes. I'll be talking about that obviously later on as well. One thing to draw attention to is that what Ricardo was doing really well at this point in time as well was that he was posting about himself, and he was posting about his experiences. So, he was giving that personal touch to it. And as you can see, this would get like really good likes and engagement for him. Again, something like that when he moved out to Dubai, and he would just basically post about that. And then, talking about him buying an Oculus Quest, again, he would get like, 569 likes and 130 comments on a post like this. So that goes to tell you that it really makes sense to post something personal. Okay, so let's move on to the content system. And again, before we do that, just real quick, I want to ask you 2 questions. So the first one is, out of these channels, which ones are the ones that you use for content creation today? So if we could start that poll. Okay, yeah. So almost everyone who answered, uses socials, and then a lot of you are using newsletter, blog, and some of you have started podcasts as well. Okay, so the next question that connects to this is how interconnected are these? Sorry, how interconnected are these assets you create among the channels? So basically, how much are you repurposing between these channels? And then it's a 1 to 5 scale. This will all make sense later, so I'm not just asking these for myself. It's actually relates to what I'll be talking about. Okay, so most of you, like 36% of you, said moderately interconnected, and then some of you, just about 15% said repurpose all the way. Okay, that's super nice to understand. Okay, so let's move on. So this is basically what we are doing today. We are running 2 podcasts. We are running a weekly newsletter, and then we are also running 3 LinkedIn posts per 4 people, meaning we do 12 LinkedIn posts, among these people. And how do you do this? How do you get to this? Well, to be honest, it's really easy. You just need a clear structure, you need clear goals, and you need consistency. Boom, super easy. But actually, how did we end up here? Obviously, is the question, because a lot has happened since I started, working on this about 10 months ago. So this is basically Ricardo mentioning that I joined the agency 10 months ago. And then, it's my post as well. Again, you're going to see the engagement differences there. So in the beginning, when I joined, Ricardo was basically responsible for everything. He was writing a newsletter on a weekly basis. He was running a podcast, sort of. He was, running some conversations, and he was writing some LinkedIn posts, as you guys have already seen. Now, to understand how this looked like, basically there were 2 people in the agency at that time who were doing things full time. It was Ricardo and Thibaut. None of them really have like a content-based background, so they weren't really focusing on that. So they were basically just doing things the way they saw or the way they imagined it would make sense. And to be honest, they did a pretty good job. And actually, it was funny because even before I joined, I had some conversations with Thibaut about some of the posts that they were putting out, some of the podcast episodes. I said, listen, I think it looks nice, but there are a few things that I would change. I would make it a lot more minimalistic just to make more sense. Obviously, I would make the captions bigger, make it stand out. And then, as you could see, this was mostly focused on Ricardo's brand. So everything that was done, with regards to content creation, pretty much revolved around Ricardo's background, Ricardo's network, and anything that he had in mind with this. And they got some engagement on this. Ricardo was mostly posting on his own, and they were mostly creating the podcast together with someone from an external source, so like an external expert. And this is like the really basic setup that they had for running the podcast. So just a link to the guy, where he needs to cut, what he needs to cut, and then like a really basic branding guide on, okay, do we want to be using these colors and these formats and all of that. And then he was writing a newsletter on a weekly basis. But again, as you can see, and the text is not really important here, but as you can see, they didn't really have much consistency to it in the way they look like. So he was basically, whenever he had an idea about something during the week, he would try to write about that around the end of the weekend. And again, you see that the branding guide didn't really have much effect on anything, basically. So you see that these colors are not really representative of that. So this is when I joined. I was like, okay, bring it on. Let's see what I can do of this. So this is basically when I joined. Now, this is purposefully this chaotic because this is how it felt like. In the beginning, I was working with some of our clients. So I was doing client work. We had the podcast conversations which were mostly ad hoc. So, it was like, okay, we are talking to some people that Ricardo had some connection to, or, in his network that seemed interesting and, were interesting. There was a newsletter that he would write weekly. I would start writing into that, editing it, adding some ideas to it. I have been already posting on LinkedIn. So, I also started to post more related to the target audience. And then we were also building an academy based on Ricardo's background, in LinkedIn advertising and things like that. So, as you can see, it was really, really chaotic. And basically my idea was, okay, let's use what we have. So, what I was doing at this point is I was sort of trying to understand who are we talking to? What is the target audience? What is the tone of voice that Ricardo is using, especially as he was still writing most of the newsletters? So from my end, I was basically trying to, mimic that and just add to it what I could. So you'll see that, the first posts that we were put out podcast-wise were the same that they used before. And then I actually started talking to the editor guy and started making things, a bit more simplistic and just, more focused on the Saasmic brand, as you can see. In the meantime, I also started editing actually, because, it was just something that I also had to do just to speed up things and, put out content more often. And what you'll see here is I was already testing and trying things. So for example, there's this idea that, sometimes would make sense if you want to get some, some quick hook or attention, which is basically I would purposefully do some things wrong, which I know sounds like, it's just something I say because, I messed up. But basically I would, let's say, put a progress bar in, not in the very edges of the picture, because I wanted to have something that stands out, maybe looks weird if someone just scrolls through and makes people stop. But at the same time, we were basically just testing out things. And, the same thing you'll see with regards to the newsletter is that I would basically see, okay, what are some things that would help make it look a bit more consistent? So if someone, looks at it, obviously they will see that the sender is the same person. But if someone looks at it, they can figure out, okay, this actually, again, comes from the same guy. It's the same sort of setup. There is something in the beginning, sort of just, a topic summary of like, okay, this is what we would be talking about today. Make it a bit more visual. So, add some emojis. I know some people hate emojis, but the idea was just to make it a bit, stand out more. So not just a plain text. And what I also started doing, and this is, purposefully why I asked you guys about repurposing and connecting things, is I started to connect things to each other. So if we would have something interesting like a template in the newsletter, I would start posting about that, and I would actually move that to LinkedIn. And what you will see is that, one, it obviously speeds up content creation because basically you already have some of the assets that then you can reuse onto, multiple different channels. But two, it actually gets better traction because, some people that will see you on LinkedIn will obviously also see you in the newsletter. So it's good to reiterate the same points that you want to be talking about. And as you see, it got like really good engagement at certain points. Again, I don't think, and I will, address this, but I don't think likes is specifically something that you need to be aiming for. And, in this case, for example, this was basically me being at the right place at the right time. So this was the beginning of the year, and I posted about a template that helps, connect marketing and finance together, which is, even if people have budgets from the previous year, end of the year, it's still something that, it's something that is in their mind at that point. So obviously it's going to work into that. And then also, a free template, just value that you're giving to the people, is always going to be popular. Same thing here. Again, we had something in the newsletter, and I would repurpose that into LinkedIn. And, you would think, okay, that's repurposing. That's what you do. But you can actually do so much more. So the same thing, at the same time, I saw that PDFs started to gain traction. And, those carousels that you see today all the time on LinkedIn actually started to get like better traction, better engagement. So I was like, okay, let's do, a PDF out of this. And it's literally the same thing. I'm talking about, the same ideas, but now I made a PDF out of it. And then I also made a video out of it that, refers back to the PDF. And this would still get engagement. This would still get me in front of the people that I want to be in front of. And then at the same time, I always want to be, creatively testing things. So I would start testing sort of like something that, is a PDF, but also looks a bit nicer, just is able to grab attention. But what I was doing here is, again, repurposing. So I was just reusing some ideas that Ricardo already had, that he was teaching in his LinkedIn courses, and had a lot of, material on it. So we could just reuse these things. At the same time, what I think is really important, and why I showed you in the beginning that Ricardo was doing some personal posts as well, is to try and keep a personal voice. So some people do sort of like a LinkedIn voice, which is, they are trying to talk in a certain way or write in a certain way, which, is understandable, and it can make sense sometimes. It can be something that actually helps your writing, but I think most often it's better to try to keep some of your, own basically characteristic in it, and then try to speak in a voice that's, reflective of how you talk in normal, in like in person as well. So it's important to post some of those posts as well, I feel like, and that's what I was doing in this time as well. So, I sort of felt like this. I was like, okay, we are posting things, we are actually creating podcasts, we are writing the newsletters, it's getting good traction, we are getting nice feedback. But at the same time, I was like, okay, this is going to be a bit difficult as well. So let me move on to the next stage. But before that, can I just ask you guys to answer me? Have you tried something in marketing lately that you felt could be risky? That you felt like, okay, this might not actually work out. This is something that, might not be what the agency wants to go for at this point, but we want to be trying it out. Okay, I would say that's an overwhelming no. It's also nice to see that almost 40% said yes, but I would say generally you guys said no, you wouldn't try things like that. Okay, so this brings me to the next stage, which is what I call trial and error, but mostly error. So still somewhat chaotic, but as you can see, things were getting a bit more clear. I was understanding more, what is the tone of voice, what is the audience that we are going for. I would still try to balance things between, client work and setting up the internal marketing as a running system. But, things were clearing up a bit more. I would understand the podcast more. We like sort of, okay, what are we aiming with it? What is the main goal with that? I would have a more clear understanding of where the newsletter is going and what are we trying to convey with that. And as you saw, I was already, somewhat connecting those different bits. And, I feel like a really good idea at this point is to start a completely new podcast, because obviously you feel like, oh, now I understand the podcast goal. Now I know what we're trying to do with the newsletter. And we sort of have like a good cadence with LinkedIn posts. We're already posting, from 2 people. And at that time, Thibaut also started posting. So I'm like, okay, let's start a new podcast with the goal of involving more people from the agency into the creation of the content that we were already doing. And, I was running even more repurposing again. These were still ideas that we would post in in our newsletter, things that we would talk about there. I would, again, just repurpose it as like, an image that I would add some copy to. Plus, I would try things again with, PDFs. So same ideas in a PDF form. I also felt like it's super important to try things with numbers, in the sense of like, okay, what are some actual numbers that you can showcase. So in this sense, we were posting about, a case study that we ran with one of our clients. And to be honest, most of this was getting really good engagement. So it was really nice to see that, these are things that work. But it also meant that I was constantly testing and trialing out things. And I felt like, okay, these are nice things, but it actually takes a lot of time. So, to create a PDF on its own and to, make it stand out and whatnot, that obviously always going to take some time. So this is the time when I felt like, okay, how can I speed this up? And I was actually super lucky to find something from Kevin and Tom, which I'll share with you guys, which was basically this. It was like a huge carousel template that just, sped up things. So basically I would like, okay, I can now, basically just run a lot of these different PDFs without me always having to think about how they would look like. I would just use some tools, some PDF merger tool, PDF compression tools. And I felt like, okay, I can speed up things. To be honest, I kind of loved and hated this system, because it also meant that even though I could use these templates and I could, create things much faster, since I was doing everything on my own and then the client work and stuff like that, it also meant that I had to be super, super, just focused on what I'm doing, posting or what I'm creating, because then it would mean that I have to redo everything from the beginning and, re-merger everything. But nevertheless, it meant that we could actually now push out these things faster, and I could try things more faster, and, I could just run these cadences. And as you can see, again, the idea was to connect as much as I could. So, I would be posting about, or I would be creating content on, for example, podcast strategy, which we were running in the meantime, and we were getting really good feedback from the guests. So, it seemed like an obvious choice to post about those. And again, you will see that these would get like pretty good engagement. I would also, cross-reference. So I would be like, okay, I'm posting about something, but then I'm mentioning this is actually from the newsletter. So this is something that, reflects back on what we do in our newsletter. Again, just to try and create this, sort of cross-reference effect, and to not just repurpose the content in this way, but also to drive the different audiences onto other platforms that we're using. And then, we would also put out templates. So I think basically the thing to take away from this is that we were generally trying to create as much value to our audience as possible, which meant, free templates, free guides, whatever that we could, that we know that the target audience would be able to actually use. And then same thing here, templates, free template list. If I post something like this, I can actually do the same thing in a PDF format. All of this, just because you posted a template in whatever format and you already wrote about it, you can do the same thing, build it into a PDF, build a guide on it, and then just reference back to the free template. So that's something that you will see, over and over again. And again, super important, I think, is to also, trial as much as you can with some personal voice. So, besides producing all of that free value or whatever, you also want to bring in something that, reflects your way of thinking and, your thoughts. And I was also, pretty much just trying out different copywriting structures and different edits that I would see work for other people or other creators. And, it was also super nice that at this point, we actually got another active person from inside of the agency. So Thibaut also started posting. He might, redo some things. So this is basically the same post that you saw up here, the case study. He would, repurpose it and do a different hook in the beginning or change up some things, but he would basically reuse everything that we already had. And, it was super nice to include another person and just basically be able to try more things and just push out the content that we already had. And in the meantime, I was basically thinking, okay, this is all nice. It's nice that we are pushing all this content out, but I also want to be able to, again, speed things up and make things more systemized. So I would just try to build a new table for video creation. This is what you see here. Again, not super important what is on it. It's basically just to give you an idea on, okay, how I was, trying and testing things out. Super simple Google Sheet form, new sheet for all of the different episodes, and just a way to talk to the editors that were working with us. Format testing you see here as well. I think it's important to see that, basically, just because you find something that, sort of looks okay, there's always room for, improvement. Again, as you see, I moved back the progress bar to its base. I would, try things like, okay, where are we putting our logo? Do we actually want to be focusing on the Saasmic branding at this point? Is it super important that it's going to be Saasmic, or is it more important just to, focus on the type of content that we put out? And we would also be trialing things with like, okay, let's, get a hook from the video that's like an action sequence sort of from the short. Just put it in the beginning in black and white, and then start the whole sequence just to see how it's progressing. And, it was all fun, and I actually pretty enjoyed what we were doing. But I also felt like it's not working out, and we actually had to let one of the editors go because we felt like we can't really keep up the quality and the pace that we want to be doing, which also meant at the same time that I had to get back to editing. So, this would again take up a lot of time from my end. So I would, go back to trialing things on my own. and creating the edits as well. Which I don't know if you guys do any editing, but if you have, an Air with like 8 GB of RAM, it's not something that you're going to be super happy about after a while. So I was like, okay, this is, it's time to find someone. It's time to find someone who can edit the way we want to be editing, who can keep up the pace, and who can basically help us scale up. Because, it's one thing to be operationally putting out content. It's completely different thing to be able to scale things up and to build on what you already have and just, add to it all the time. So this obviously meant that I had to look for an editor. And, as you can see here, I basically talked to a billion people, on Upwork constantly. I tried other platforms like PH Jobs, which is a site for Philippine workers. And I was just basically trying to find, I didn't really care about, what their background is. I was just trying to find someone who could produce the type of content that, we are looking for and could produce it at scale. And, this also meant that people would constantly be reaching out. We would be needing, or I would be needing to vet them and just to, figure out, okay, how can we find the right person? I just put this here because to me, this was a personal favorite. Hey there, sorry for the late reply, but I have been thinking about it and I decided not to do it, although I would be a good fit and can adapt accordingly. So, this was a fun message. This was something that I would constantly see like, super fun. I would be super good for you guys, but I wouldn't do it. We would get this constantly. And meanwhile, in the same time, obviously I couldn't forget about the newsletter and all of the content that we were already putting out. So I was basically trying things like, okay, let's put, as you saw before, let's put something more personal into it. So we'd see that I would start adding some personal notes in the beginning of Ricardo, just to, give it a new spin and just to try out things. And at the same time, I would also still refer back to other things that we are doing. So, if I posted something about podcasting and talked about that in the newsletter, then that would, then become, as you can see, a PDF or a carousel that I can later use. So this was, again, still, referring back to everything that we do. And, we would also run things that would be in a sequence, sort of. So that meant that, if we would have a recurring theme, we saw that that would get like pretty good engagement and open rates. So if things would actually link to one another and it wouldn't always just be standalone newsletters, that also got really good engagement. So then we would also translate those to PDFs as well. So, same thing here that you see. Okay, and then let's move on a bit. Again, bit of a mixed bag of emotions. I was actually super happy that now we are able to put all of that content out. And now we were, pretty much creating things at scale in the sense of like, okay, 2 different podcasts running, creating PDFs, 3 different people posting. So that was good to see. But to be honest, at the same time, with all of the, editor search and everything going on and trying to figure things out, I felt like, yeah, this is super difficult and something is still not working out. So this is basically the next stage. And this was about around like month 6, when we were already, as you saw, running the podcast, having the newsletter and the LinkedIn. Things were cleaning up in the sense of like everything was handled by me at this point. I would be running the weekly newsletters. I would be doing the podcast conversations mostly. I would do the research, the finding the right people that we want to be talking to, the guest, and I would be creating the questions and all of that. And we would have now, LinkedIn posts from 3 different people. Plus, I could also include Apur into the podcast creation. And that was super nice to actually include even more people from the agency and just have more ideas. So, that also meant that another marketer could actually add some of his own ideas. As you remember, I was basically talking about the fact that, the editor work wasn't really happening. Anyone who we chose or we started working with and onboarded a really cumbersome process, they would either not be able to scale up or not be able to keep up the production level that we were looking for. And this was basically a time when ChatGPT got obviously the fame and everyone was talking about it. So I started to use different AI tools, ChatGPT a lot for repurposing some of the copy, but then I also started use, some of the video editors that were AI based, and I started to post with those. So that would really speed up the production process. it would need a lot of like redos or like, a lot of corrections, but it was a good way to speed up production. So I didn't have to rely always on like either my own editing time or, the I would say mid-level editing of some of the people that we were trying to work for. So you can see that I would try things with like Opus Clip and Video.ai. It helped me speed things up. It helped me try things out. So, I could just still continue with the trialing. But at the same time, we still needed the editors because, if you are going to run everything with AI, it really takes a lot of time to get all of the nice bits out, and you have to make a lot of corrections. And, if you want to be moving to scale up, you can't always do everything on an operational level. So as you can see, same setup here. I was talking to people through WhatsApp. I was talking to people through Slack. I would be trying to run things through Asana and then to Google Sheets. And I know, if you hear this now, you're like, yeah, but that's obviously not going to work out if you do things on this many channels. But if you're doing this, constantly on a daily basis and your goal is to put out content, you're going to run into this. So that's basically the whole idea here, is to figure out what was going wrong and, to see which were the parts that were basically, just slowing things down. And still, I know I come back to this all the time, but repurpose all the way. So, basically the idea again here was that if we had a conversation in the podcast about marketing automation, then let's do a post with like a flowchart, that explains all of the different steps necessary for this. Even try different formats with the flowcharts. Let's create PDFs on this. And then the same thing for everything else that we were posting. So if we are talking about connecting marketing to bottom line revenue, let's do that in a flowchart way. Let's talk about it in a PDF, in a guide. And you can see that all of these are getting engagement, and, people are actually noticing this, and, different people will react to different formats. But basically, we're able to reuse the same ideas that we have and, just basically reiterate our thinking and, the main points that our target audience is interested in different formats for them. And, this also meant that I would be doing a lot of posts with AI, but at the same time, I would actually do posts about that as well. So basically, I would post about how we manage to, amp up our productivity by using AI. So again, a guide on that. So basically, you can use everything that you do. I also started to introduce the new podcast in the newsletter, which meant that I could give more just a platform basically to some of the people in the agency, which I think is super important in the sense of, actually having that personal touch and actually making people connect the face to the ideas that you're putting out. But also meant that, I could involve another team member and I could involve new ideas from other people inside of the agency. And again, super important, just to add some personal voice to it. So, we would also post about things like Ricardo setting up, a course or recording a course, and some personal thoughts, some personal ideas. Trying new things in the sense of like B-rolls. I think it's something that you would see all the time with video production. If you guys watch Instagram reels, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, you would see all of these engaging videos with B-rolls on it, or like, split screen, whatever. I also felt like at the time it's maybe worth a shot to try all of these, just because I felt like maybe that's also going to help boost our engagement and also going to be something a bit different, a bit new. So, it's like trying things that might not actually work on LinkedIn, but, it's actually something that you don't see a lot of people doing. So why not? And we also, thought about at this point, let's make money directly. So how can we use all of these platforms? Because now we have, the newsletter list, we have people constantly engaging with us. We have, good feedback. So how can we actually make money directly out of this and not just down the line 6 months, whatever, in the sense of like inbound? So we would turn some of the templates that we already had and some of the value that we were already putting out free into paid assets, in the sense of like, adding more value to it. Building it more based on some of the feedback that we were getting, and then just putting that out as well. And, again, repurposing it in the newsletter, building a course that's about LinkedIn advertising in the newsletter as well. So, again, I would see really good open rates on these, and, just constant feedback from people that they're actually enjoying this type of content. So it was super nice to see that. And, this was all great. but at the same time, I felt like something just doesn't feel right about this. So, it was a bit like I can't scale and it needs almost endless effort. So, we were producing a lot of things, but it felt like I actually need to do all of this constantly on an operational level as well. So it didn't feel like I have a strategy. And so that's the point where I actually was able to talk to one of my best friends, who's also a growth marketer. And, I think sometimes taking some outside perspective, someone who doesn't have the daily grind on the things that you're doing and can just, talk about some of his ideas or some of their ideas is super useful. And basically, this is what led to me understanding that it actually may be worth to make things much more simple compared to what I was already doing, which basically meant that I realized I actually need to just focus on one source. So instead of doing all of those different things, instead of getting, all of the different ideas from everyone and trying to build that into all of the different formats that I was doing, I should be focusing on one true source. And this is what I tried to do. So I actually started to talk to our editors that were working that time with us. And I was like, okay, let's make things much simpler. Let's try to create a structure with this, and let's just focus on one thing at a time. I actually tried a lot with the editors that we had at the time, but I think sometimes it's also important to understand that if something is not working out, you don't have to keep trying to amend it, which I know sounds like a super cliche, but I think it's super important as well on an operational level, is for you to sort of understand that, it doesn't worth the time and the effort after a while. So, some of these editors that we were working with, obviously in the sense they were super cheap compared to, working with like a high level editor from the US. But to be honest, things can add up. And if you always have to rework things and you always have to, try to edit the same things over and over again and try to explain the same ideas, you're going to run into walls. So actually, I went back to what was working before. The guy that we worked before, but just didn't have the right time. And, we didn't have the right level of structure at the time. This time we restarted, but, from the beginning, basing everything on a structure and basing everything on a system. And it was also super nice because we managed to find another editor. And now we're back to today, what I started the whole thing with. And so basically what I was trying to show with this to you guys is that, I was trialing and testing a lot of different things. It was probably not the smartest idea to start a podcast, when I was still sort of setting up the previous podcast and we were still sort of figuring out, okay, what's the best way to do with the newsletters? How can we actually make sure that we are, putting out all of the LinkedIn posts that we want to be putting out on a weekly basis? And how can we keep up the consistency and the quality as well? So it's not just, not just posting for posting, but it's actually a level of quality that we are okay with. And it's actually something that, will bring in the traction and bring in the sort of engagement that we are looking for. And this is basically when I started to build a system, by the way, again, using AI, so using ChatGPT for a lot of this. And I actually built a structure for this in the sense of a Notion table, one part of which was an asset library with all of the assets that we are using, and another part of which was basically the tasks, the different statuses that we were looking for, and the different content types, and then everything just interconnected. And what you saw before, which I was, sort of repeating as a parrot, was repurposing. And I feel like at this point, we managed to bring that to sort of like a new level in the sense of now everything really was interconnected. So all of the ideas that we put out were actually connected to one another. If we would have a podcast conversation with someone, we would obviously gain a lot of, really high level shorts out of those. So like really good ideas from the people that we would invite. We obviously would really, focus on inviting the right guests, high level marketers, business people, whatever. We could actually reuse those episodes in the form of a newsletter, which is almost sort of like a course. So, if someone is talking about, let's say, why data in itself is not enough and what you could do for better data attribution, that's something that we can actually then talk about in our newsletter. Then we can also post about it in like, a short form image with some text overlay. And we can build all of those PDFs that I was showing to you guys beforehand on top of those. And so basically we were able to build, everything on top of each other, make everything interconnected, and just simplify things. And, you know, I think it often can feel like something that's more complex is more high level and it's going to be better. But to be honest, I think, you know, there can be a really high level of sophistication in this, even if it's super simple. And I think it's sometimes worth just, you know, taking a step back and just looking at all of the things that you're trying to do and seeing if there's actually something that you're overcomplicating, which I was definitely doing with, you know, all of the different ideas on all of the different channels that we were using. And so, you know, we also at this point managed to clear things up a bit in the sense of actually, you know, sort of just optimizing our social presence, our social presence to this as well. So, you know, if we had, we already had the budget planning template that we were sending at this point. So, you know, all of this and all of the ideas, the newsletter, some of the key, you know, ideas that we put out in PDF formats, it also makes a lot of sense to, you know, just sort of showcase those and just refer back to those wherever you can. And then at the same time, I feel like whenever you're creating content and whenever you are trying to do something creatively, it's worth to just try out things. So, you know, when I was asking you guys about testing and trialing things and just, you know, asking, have you tried something that you weren't sure if it's going to work or, you know, felt like it was risky? You know, putting some memes on LinkedIn is definitely not something that is necessarily, you know, the cleanest idea that it's going to work. But I think it's also just, you know, worth trying in the sense of, one, you're doing something that obviously the same ideas are being represented that we are, you know, representing in other content that we're putting out, but it's just more fun and it's just helped you relax a bit from the everyday, you know, creative content creation that you need to be doing. And again, just so showcasing yourself. So, you know, this is something that Ricardo has recently put out. He was actually heading to Saasmic. And then, you know, it's something that just reflects who he is, what he's doing, whatever. And that's also super nice. This is something about his run that he was doing. It was a half marathon. And then I think it's also worth talking a bit about feedback and metrics. In the beginning, when we talked about, okay, what are some of the KPIs that we want to be focusing on, we decided with Ricardo that we would focus on leading rather than lagging metrics, meaning that we would mostly focus on output and production before the system is set, and mostly focus on like qualitative feedback and engagement. So instead of looking at like all of the likes and whatever that you get, we would rather focus on, okay, are we producing the content that we want to be producing? And then, you know, are we getting feedback on it? So in a qualitative sense, are people actually saying that they are enjoying what we are putting out? And to be honest, we got really good feedback all throughout the way. So, you know, with regards to the podcast, what we would do is basically just base everything on research. So make sure that we are researching people, you know, as much as we can and create relevant questions for them. And, you know, we were getting 10 out of 10 really good feedback from everyone that was at the, you know, as a guest. And, you know, it would get us basically a reputation of actually people who we invite would be really happy to join at this point. We'd also get, you know, qualitative feedback in the sense of like engagement. So, you know, engagement under the post, just people reflecting about some of the ideas that we put out, some of the guides that we created. So that was also super nice. And then, you know, in the sense of like some people putting you into lists, some people just referencing your stuff. And then I guess, you know, it's also super nice that Growth Tribe felt like it makes sense to invite me and to talk about this, how we set this up. As for the future, just real quick, this is basically what we are aiming for at this point. So now that we clearly see what are the channels that are working for us, what are some of the structures or, you know, some of the systems that actually make sense to keep in, and what can we add to it? And is, you know, just what are the type of content that we put out that gets the best engagement, that gets the best feedback. This is basically what we want to be building on, and just give more structure to it. So like, you know, structurized external content production in the sense of like, okay, what are the long form and short form things that we want to be putting out? Actually move, you know, the media production that we already do to different platforms, and then, you know, clear up the internal database, or have some things that you need to have a place for ideas, and just make sure that everything is more structured and systemized. And then, you know, focus a lot on social profiles before in our, for our target audience and what we are doing. This is actually a major add-on that we can use. And this is a really important platform because a lot of the target audience actually hangs out on these profiles. And it makes sense to build up, you know, the profiles that we have inside of the agency as much as we can. And then lastly, just to, you know, have sort of like a summary of what I talked about, how to do it if you would start today. If I would start today, what I would make sure is to have a rough strategy from the beginning. So to make sure that I at least sort of understand the goals and, you know, just understand what is it that I'm trying to build, what are the channels I want to be using, and why. Obviously, you're not going to know anything, you know, for certain. So you will need to be revisiting this in the beginning more often. And then, you know, after a while, I don't know, every quarter, every 6 months, it's worth to revisit the strategy that you're putting out. You know, focus on figuring out who you're talking to, which I know seems obvious. It's like, oh yeah, well, I completely know who I'm talking to, but it's actually worth, you know, again, just to take a step back and just to understand what are the different maybe positions that you're talking to, what are they reacting to, you know, the best, what is the tone of voice that you should be hitting, but then how can you still keep your own voice? I would say definitely focus on perfecting listings. So instead of trying to do everything at the same time, putting out a really high quality newsletter, trying to build up different profiles on LinkedIn at the same time, trying to post 4 times a week and all of that. Instead, focus on, like, you know, making sure that some of the things you're doing without operationally needing to micromanage everything all the time. Less channels, less formats, better content. So, you know, just keep the quality up and don't try to, you know, win TikTok, Instagram, everything at the same time. I would really focus on keeping a genuine voice. So, you know, I think it's, as you could see from some of the engagement rates and some of the, you know, the numbers that I was showing you with regards to likes and whatnot, whenever people were posting about some of their personal things, you obviously next to it, you need the, you know, the thought leadership and whatever, but you also sort of just need to be able to keep your genuine voice and to you know, make yourself sort of just relatable as a person. That also means including some personal takes and, you know, content about the creator. You know, definitely repurpose as much as you can. So make sure that, you know, if you're creating something that seems to be working, use it as many times in as many different formats as you can. You know, obviously don't just reuse one thing for the end of times, but just make sure that just because you posted about something, it makes sense to post about the same thing a billion other times in different formats, talk about it in a podcast, do a PDF, whatever. And then, you know, try to create a structure and break down complex processes to simple steps, because I feel like when in the beginning, I was trying to run the editing, I was trying to post on LinkedIn, trying to do everything at the same time. The biggest difficulty was that I didn't see, you know, all of the steps breaking down to, like, okay, you know, this week we need to do this, then from that comes this and all of that. So it's really worth to try and build up a structure in that sense. And then I would say definitely in the beginning, but, you know, even after a while, don't necessarily for likes, you know, obviously track engagement and look at qualitative feedback. And after a while, so for now, at this point, we will be looking at quantitative feedback as well. But make sure that you are you're not trying to perfect everything for likes, because, you know, it's a lot of times you'll see that the people who are actually interested in you, your target audience, might be silent on watchers, and they might be just, you know, not engaging with you. What I couldn't show you because of, you know, personal reasons, or you know, not being able to share everything, but we would get a lot of inbound interest in you know, that were based on the stuff that we were putting out. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So thanks a lot for listening. I hope it was somewhat enjoyable.
Thank you, Zoltan. That was actually very, very helpful for everyone, I think. In a minute, I will also share the feedback form with everyone. So please, if you want the recording, fill in the feedback form. And also we will share some resources that were mentioned and some things extra from Zoltan. So yes, please fill in the feedback form. And now we can move on to the Q&A. We don't have a lot of time, so we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. So let's try, let's start with Beer. Do you use ChatGPT when writing your content? If so, how do you still keep your personal voice? Is that even possible with ChatGPT?
Yeah, I do use ChatGPT. I think two things to keep in mind here is that one, you definitely don't want to be using ChatGPT in the sense of, it doing the work instead of you. I think there are a lot of good guides, and I will try to put some in the resources that basically explain to you how you can use some of these AI tools to help you in the ideation process. For a while, ChatGPT could actually, browse the internet, and it would help me, just research some of the ideas that I would already have, and then build on that. But basically what I would do most of the time is I would sort of have it interview me. So if I would have a topic, I would research some of it on my own. I would give it some links. If you buy a ChatGPT 4 subscription, you can give it links and it can check it out. And then I would ask it to sort of interview me about some of the aspects and just ask me questions. And then I could feed in my own voice into it. So even, preparing for this presentation, I would basically use the same ChatGPT prompt that I was using for building my content calendar in Notion. And I would turn that into a presentation. So just, break down how I did that with it, and just ask it to ask me questions of the whole process. And then I could feed it my answers. And, that would help a lot with keeping my own voice and not letting it write instead of me. But then you can also use it for writing, I guess, in the sense of you can just, create something, ask it to create something that's similar to that. So copy the tone of voice, copy the writing style, and then just amend it. So, then just basically say, hey, actually, this is better, and let it know that the version that you wrote, the version that you fixed, is actually the better way.
Really nice, and I think you answered the question. That's a good suggestion. Thanks. That's what Beer said. Also, someone asked, do you believe that LinkedIn is a key source for the business marketing right now?
It's a really good question. I would say it really depends on who you are trying to talk to. If you know that your target audience hangs out on LinkedIn, if you know that the type of people that you want to be aiming for with your product, service, whatever, will be, on LinkedIn, then it definitely is something that you should use. I think if you compare LinkedIn to a few years ago, although as you could see with Ricardo's post, organic was much higher and, a lot more people were reached. At the same time, it was maybe less relevant than it is today. So more and more people are using LinkedIn more as like a social platform and for social selling. So I think it's definitely worth a try if you know that your audience is actually available on LinkedIn.
Okay, and I think Beer sent a follow-up question. Could you elaborate on engagement? How does that practically manifest?
So I would say, in our case, definitely engagement for us, for example, with LinkedIn, was, how many people are reacting to it? What are the impressions that we are getting? So are we actually reaching, a large number of people? And then, as I said, sort of qualitative in the sense of, are people actually, when someone reaches out, for example, inbound, we would literally just ask them, hey, where did you see us? Like, what was that made you reach out to us? And often they would just react, yeah, I saw you on LinkedIn. I saw the stuff that you're putting out. Or sometimes they would even mention it without our asking. With regards to like the newsletter, engagement was mostly about, are we seeing people clicking on? So we would intentionally put in a line that's like, if you want to share this with people, this is a link that you can share. And then, we would basically see if people are actually clicking on that. So they are actually sharing the newsletter with other people, and we are actually getting new subscribers. One thing I think to keep in mind here is that with, for example, the podcast, you're not aiming for a lot of views on YouTube. So we would put out the whole episodes on YouTube. What we are not aiming for now, at least, we're not aiming for, a lot of people watching. What we're aiming for is the shorts to be representative of the ideas that we want to be putting out, the shorts to pack value, and the shorts to reach the type of people that we want to be reaching on LinkedIn instead of getting a lot of views on YouTube. So you can, later build more into like shorter forms on YouTube as well. That's not like 1.5 hours or 60 minutes. But I think you should much more aim on, engaging with the type of audience that you're interested in through the platforms that you are aiming to reach.
I think
that makes sense.
Also, yeah, I think that also answers the question. Let us know if there is a follow-up. Darko asks, what were you prioritizing, quality or quantity?
I would say definitely quality, but as you saw there was definitely a part where I was really aiming at putting out as much as possible, in the sense of just bringing the production levels up to like a certain consistency. And that's basically why, when I figured out that simplifying things is actually super helpful, was that I realized that I don't have to struggle as much with like daily production, because I actually know that I can just repurpose a lot of the stuff that I already have. I know that that's high quality, so I can just focus on one thing being high quality, the podcast in this case, and then I can repurpose most of that high quality material into other things. So I already have the quality there, and then I can just focus on, okay, let's put this into other formats. And then of course you want to be putting out the personal things that I was talking about, but that in that sense you can just focus on making sure that one thing is high quality and build from there.
Yeah, but I guess you have to think of both, and you just have to figure out what you want to prioritize at that specific moment.
I would say in most cases, focus on quality, because you can put out a lot of posts on LinkedIn, but if it's just the regurgitated ideas of other people and it's nothing that adds to you, it's not going to be as interesting. It's much more interesting if you put out things less often, but those things are really valuable to the people that you're trying to talk to.
Yeah, and what we always say is experimentation. So you can always experiment with the quantity, but the quality should be always very good. I think we have time for one last question. So Deepti, I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong, asked, I face challenge every time before deciding a theme for my SaaS product promotion in every social media platform. Can you assist me with this?
So the question is how to decide on the theme of your SaaS product?
Yeah, I think for different platforms and different social media platforms.
Yeah, that's a really difficult question, in the sense of, I think it depends on a lot of things, but I think it's always less important how you are, how you're sort of branding things, in the sense of how things look like, and much more important, what is the value that you are trying to convey and trying to transfer to the people that are interested in your product. If I understand your question right, because I'm not 100% sure what you mean by theme, but I would say, for example, when we were setting up the podcast, we were already thinking about like, okay, what should be the name of the podcast? What should be the sort of the intro and outro? How should it look like? Whatever. But that was something that we mostly figured out after, I think, like the 6th or 7th episode. So we already had, people coming on. We were already much more focused on, are those the right people? Are they able to bring the quality of answers and whatever, like ideas to the podcast that we are looking for? And much less interested in, okay, what is, the name of the podcast? What is it that we are using as a team? But I think you will always find out the team if you try to base it on what is the type of people that you're talking to, and what are the key pain points that they are facing. So, what is it that they're really interested in? And, that's going to help you figure out the team, because obviously if you're talking to a bunch of bankers and something related to, like data points in CRM systems for bankers, for example, that's going to have its own more formal tone, compared to when you're talking to like whatever freelance artists and you're trying to build the SaaS products for them. So I think it's always more important to try to focus on what is the target audience's pain points and what are you trying to solve for them. And that's going to help you that's going to help you build the team out.
That makes total sense. I think that was it. Thank you everyone for joining, and of course,
thanks a lot, everyone,
for doing this for us. There are some more questions, but you can always reach to Zoltan's LinkedIn. We will have it in the email with all the resources and recording. So yes, please fill in the feedback form, and
Happy to answer any
we'll-
questions. Yeah.
Yes, of course, you can always reach out to him. And yeah, we will see you in our next event.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thanks a lot,
everyone.
everyone. See ya.